Hey guys, this is Marco. I'm your watch colonel, bringing you another video here today. And before we begin, of course, quick wristwatch check. What am I wearing? I'm wearing my Rolex Submariner. That's right, guys, a Rolex Submariner. Guys, I want to bring you something a little off the beaten path, something away from Rolex, even though I am incredibly happy and excited to have gotten my first Rolex. You know, this is a horology channel, it is a watch channel, and Rolex, fortunately or unfortunately, isn't the only maker of watches. So I would like to bring you a video on my opinion between Patek and Lange and why I ultimately believe Lange is, at least in modern contemporary watchmaking, a much better brand than Patek is. And again, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it. Let me know down in the comments below which one you prefer, of course. So this is ultimately my rationale. So I received an email yesterday from a watch collector. I don't know if he wants me to kind of say his name, but he mentioned how he was looking forward to kind of potentially getting a Lange 1815 up down, and I told him it's an absolutely gorgeous watch and that personally I prefer Patek or Lange to Patek, and I thought, well, actually this would be a fantastic kind of video to make or a fantastic topic for a video. And at the end of the day, I want to give you kind of my thoughts. So obviously Lange was established in blah 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 18 something. That's a load of baloney, guys. It's a Phoenix brand. They've been around since, I would say, kind of the 90s is when they came out with the datograph and kind of revived the brand. That's their true, genuine history. And at the end of the day, anything else or whatever they say in their marketing is just BS. I'm sorry, but you're not a brand that's been around since the 1800s. You're a brand who's been around since the 1990s, okay? That's your true, genuine history. You can buy the rights to a name and ultimately claim it's your history. I think that's unethical and it's untrue, okay? Granted, that is the one downside I would say that Lange has, is that they only have about 30 years of real history to them, at least in their modern contemporary brand, the brand that's now owned by Richemont. So I will give Patek the edge in terms of the history, the kind of brand cachet. There's no doubt about that they beat Lange when it comes to that. However, what I would like to bring up is Lange was the first maker of true, genuine in-house movements. I mean, they really disrupted the entire Swiss watch industry and made watch collectors and watch enthusiasts realize just how much brands were taking advantage of them, especially Swiss watch brands. Back in the day, obviously, most people were using kind of Valjoux, Lemania bases, or things of that nature, and calling them kind of watch movements or their in-house movements, and calling it a day. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of those movements can be bought in scale, and ultimately the charge on them is really not that expensive, if we're being honest with one another. Really, the majority of the expense comes from kind of, at least from Patek's perspective, the handwork that's done, right? The finishing, the assembling, the regulating, all that kind of stuff, the polishing, the beveling, what have you, all that kind of stuff obviously plays into the price of their watches, right? And then Lange came around and built their entire own in-house movements and were the first to do it, and then kind of caused an uproar in the Swiss watch industry. The reason being is that they were the first. And anytime, in my opinion, you are the first to do something, first to make kind of an in-house movement, in my opinion, you deserve all the kudos in the world and all the credit in the world. And Lange was the first to develop an in-house chronograph. Obviously, they came out at the time with the datograph. I don't know exactly what the specific year is, but they came out with the datograph. It was the first true manual wind chronograph with an in-house movement. So to me, that already gives the edge to Lange. Secondly, is their movement finishing. I mean, let's be honest, it's second to none. I mean, there's nothing that you can take away from Lange movement finishing. And that's not to say that AP or VC or Patek Philippe doesn't finish their watches very, very well. In fact, they finish it to the highest standard, right? It's a common misconception, the idea that Lange finishes their watches better than other brands. It's not the case. Lange, just like Patek Philippe and Vacheron and AP, all finish their watches to the highest standards. Their finishing techniques are ultimately just different, and so that's what ultimately differentiates kind of the finishing from a Patek or the finishing from a Lange, right? So that's an important note to take into consideration. But to me, Lange movements are so much more visually appealing than anything on, and I would say this also about most German kind of watch brands. Their movements are so much more visually appealing to the eye, to the naked eye, of course, that I think, I mean, it's hard to say that really Patek Philippe is is much better in that respect, right? A lot of the times they hide their movements under a rotor, and Patek, you'll see, kind of is much more traditional in their approach, right? Dating back to that kind of pocket watch history from the 1800s. I think that's really the only inspiration they draw from, is their kind of their watches are really kind of pocket watch inspired by their old pocket watches. And I think that's kind of poetic in the sense, and I think that it's something that Patek really doesn't do anymore. They used to do it, I would say, kind of in I would say the 1900s, the mid to late 1900s, but they really just don't do it like they used to. They're kind of coming up with their own original designs. Now, another thing I will say is I always gave the edge to Patek Philippe over Lange when it came to the cases and the dials. I think that the cases, unquestionably, Patek make probably the most elegant and beautiful cases in the entire watch market. I don't think there's really much you can contest with that. I don't think it's really close, to be honest with you. I think Patek Philippe makes the best cases in the watch industry, hands down. I think that the dials also, especially when you get into the complications and grand complications, I think they're second to none. I think they're absolutely beautiful. The design is amazing. And overall, the finishing and the overall package you get is just, it's incredible, right? However, Lange is really not that far behind. And I would even say that, honestly speaking, what Lange is producing is much, much better than Patek Philippe. I mean, it's a lot more technologically impressive. It's a lot, in my opinion, kind of reminiscent to the kind of Omega versus Rolex debate, in that Omega is a technologically superior brand versus Rolex, which is kind of just a mass producer of watches that ultimately kind of has a tried and tested product that they don't really want to fiddle with. And I think Patek is kind of in that same genre with Rolex, in that they don't take many risks. But however, Lange takes a lot of risk, especially as it relates to their movement. I mean, we're talking double splits, triple splits, perpetual calendar chronographs with tourbillons. I mean, these are insane watches, guys. I don't think we understand just how crazy, in terms of the horology and the assembly, the movement finishing, everything, the overall package you're getting, it is, in terms of like the perspective from a watch enthusiast. It's absolutely incredible, and it's kind of jaw-dropping from Lange. And I would say this, is that their dials and overall kind of their complications are quickly approaching Patek, and I would say are neck and neck, eye to eye to Patek Philippe. I mean, they've been producing some absolute stunners that I'll put up on the screen that are much more usable. Like they came out with an annual calendar with a pusher adjuster that you can switch the entire calendar, so it's a lot more usable than, for example, a Patek annual calendar. It's absolutely gorgeous, the Lange annual calendar. I think it's beautiful and perfect, honestly, in every respect. And you continue to go across the range. Now, again, I will say this, that the cases of Lange are a little bit harsher in their kind of build quality, construction, their overall design, but that's just reminiscent of kind of the German way of finishing things, whereas Lange is a lot more elegant, a lot sleeker. So it just really depends what you're looking at, but to me, I think Lange is a lot more impressive, especially with what they've been coming out recently, and with respect to kind of the direction with which they're headed for in the future. So I would say this, ultimately, you can't go wrong with either, but if you are asking me what's my pick, I mean, at the entry level, I think that Lange totally blows Patek away. It's not even close. I mean, you compare a Calatrava to, for example, a beautiful Lange 1, I mean, is it really close? Again, we can agree to disagree. I don't really think it's close at all. I think that Lange totally blows a Patek Calatrava out of the Lange 1 blows Patek Calatrava out of the water, and you can say the same thing about the kind of 1815 up down, or just the simple 1815 that has kind of a small seconds. I think those are absolutely, or the Saxonia, excuse me, those are absolutely beautiful, and I think they really do blow the Patek Calatrava out of the water. And then you continue to go up the range, the annual calendars and the perpetual calendars. Lange is not that far away from really reaching the kind of elegance and sophistication of Patek Philippe, all while being more technologically proficient, and overall having, in my opinion, a package that is much more appealing and much more beautiful looking. So those are just my opinions. Guys, let me know down in the comment section what you think about the Patek versus Lange argument. What camp are you in? Which horse would you back? I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions. Guys, these are just my opinions at the end of the day. It's purely for entertainment purposes. Again, I think that you can't go wrong with either, but if I had to choose one, I would go Lange all the way. Guys, my name is Marco. I'm your watch cardinal. Thank you for watching this video. Please consider liking the video and subscribing for more in the future. And guys, I'll see you guys in the next one. Rolex!